Alright, so let's look at some sleep disorders. The first one, narcolepsy. So if you saw that movie Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo, then there was a narcoleptic woman in there that where she would get excited about something and then all of a sudden she'd fall asleep. And so there's kind of, he makes fun of it in the movie, and it's not a funny disorder, it's really horrible. But in the movie, when she goes to throw a bowling ball, she just all of a sudden falls asleep. And when she gets excited to eat some soup, she all of a sudden falls asleep. And that's kind of narcolepsy. Is what happens is for some reason the brain will just trigger REM sleep, and so what goes along with the REM sleep is the what they call cataplexy, where your muscles go very limp. I told you during REM sleep that your muscles become very relaxed, and so all of a sudden it's usually triggered by an emotional event, and so that triggers the REM sleep, and they just go into this state where their muscles are totally relaxed. They fall into the REM sleep, and then they come out within about 10 minutes or so. So it's a pretty terrible disorder. If you can think of it, it's very hard to work. It's dangerous to drive. They are given limited licenses. The way it's treated is it's treated with, I'm sorry. It's treated with stimulants. I have a video here that's got a dog that has narcolepsy, so let's take a look at it.
He gives new meaning to the phrase dog tired, the narcoleptic poodle who falls asleep at the drop of a hat. Paul Boyd reports the pass-out pooch is something of a medical mystery.
Skeeter is a small dog with a very big problem. No matter how much he struggles to stay awake, he can't. For this 11-pound toy poodle, almost every moment is a disturbing, losing battle with the urge to sleep. There he goes, out cold. Skeeter has narcolepsy, an uncontrollable urge to sleep. Skeeter's struggles to stay awake are heartbreaking for his family, the Hendersons of Chubbuck, Idaho. His narcolepsy is triggered by excitement, so he can be out for an afternoon walk and just fall asleep sitting up.
There you go. Come on. You can do it.
The tail-wagging prospect of jumping up on Shari Henderson's lap suddenly sets Skeeter snoozing.
Come on. Oh. He's miserable. He looked like he was a prisoner in his body. He was like, please help me. You know, I'm trapped in this little furry white shell.
When the Hendersons' grandson comes to play, Skeeter plays dead. Strangely, when Skeeter can be kept calm, that's when he seems able to stay alert. But nothing's more exciting for a dog than food. So to keep him awake long enough to eat, he has to be constantly petted and stroked. Otherwise, he's off in mid-bite.
I was just stunned that I had a narcoleptic dog in my hospital.
Skeeter's condition is so rare and so little is known about doggy narcolepsy that America's top vets are studying this home video of his symptoms.
It's not particularly unpleasant for the dog, except that he can't live a normal life. He just cannot be a dog.
He's being treated with antidepressants designed for humans. But so far, well, watch for yourself.
In the beginning, the excitement over food would put Skeeter to sleep, but then he got worse, and now just about any kind of excitement puts him under. Later in the show, we'll meet another dog.
It's pretty sad to see that, but humans, of course, get the narcolepsy too. I remember a story about a woman who was narcoleptic, and no doctor wanted her to have a baby because they were worried that she would fall asleep and smother the baby. So it was really, and then they were worried about labor. So she was able to have the baby, but she had to have somebody with her most all times. So that's narcolepsy. The traces of it, I believe, have been to a part in the thalamus. Okay, let's look at another one, sleep apnea. This is a sleep disorder where the person stops breathing while they're sleeping, and they may or may not wake up. So if they get 8 hours of sleep, they're really only getting 4 hours of sleep, and they're not going through the stages properly. And so they wake, even though it seems like they've been asleep for 8 hours, they wake up and they always feel so exhausted, so tired, because what's happening is they're constantly struggling to catch their breath. Let's take a look at another one. Okay, insomnia. Difficulties with sleeping. So there's three types of insomnia, and I want to show you that insomnia, whenever you have insomnia, you should really think about what could be causing this. Now, insomnia can definitely be related to hormones. So a pregnant woman maybe can't sleep because of the differences in estrogen. Women going through menopause. Also, some women report having difficulty sleeping prior to their menstrual period, on their menstrual period, something like that. But what insomnia usually shows us is that there's some kind of emotional disturbance, and so that the different types can mean different things. So onset insomnia is when you can't get to sleep at night, and usually that's caused by an anxiety. You're worried about something, something's really upsetting you. Maintenance insomnia is when you wake up throughout the night many, many times. So you wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. So I call this like the Santa Claus syndrome. This is when you're so excited about something or you're nervous about something that you just repeatedly wake up, wake up. And so usually what maintenance insomnia is it's usually, again, an anxiety, but it's a different kind of anxiety than what we see with onset. It's like waiting for something to happen. Okay, then the final one, termination insomnia, is when you wake up too early. Now this is a sign of depression a lot of times. So we see this with depressed people is they're able to go to sleep right away, even early in the night. Maybe they could go to sleep at 8 o'clock, but then they wake up at around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and they just can't go back to sleep. So you say, well, what's the difference between anxiety and depression? When I talk about that, I'm sure a lot of you know the difference, of course, between anxiety and depression. Anxiety is like the panicky, heart racing, so on and so forth, whereas depression is just, I don't want to live anymore, I have no energy for anything. But I think the mental thoughts that go with anxiety and depression are different, and maybe it'll help us understand why we see these differences with the insomnia. Is I think that when we're anxious, we still believe that that we have some kind of control over something. And so I think anxiety comes more from somebody believing that they have control over things that maybe they don't even have control over. And I think the thought that goes with depression is that I have no control. There's no hope. So it's interesting that these two different thought processes may lead to different types of sleep disturbances. So now let me talk about that. You shouldn't just lay in bed and start thinking about things, because then the bed becomes associated with just negative thoughts, and that's where you do your thinking rather than your sleeping. Keep your bed just for sleeping. But also I want you to be alert to sleeping difficulties usually, except for when they're hormonal problems, is a lot of times they're related to emotions. So maybe think about what's bothering me, what's going on with me. Okay, this is our last disorder. This is an interesting one, the REM behavior disorder. So what happens with this one is they say 15% of all men over the age of 55 have this, and it says paralysis does not occur during REM sleep. And so what happens is since the paralysis doesn't occur, they become violent in their sleep, and they hit and kick and walk around and all that kind of stuff. So they're very dangerous to sleep with. They have to sleep in a special room, and they shouldn't sleep with anyone else. That's all. Sometimes you'll see things like that on Oprah where a man choked his wife, and should he get off, should he not, and so on and so forth. And so it is a highly recognized disorder, and it's more common than what we think. 15% of men over the age of 55 have this disorder. Now I'd like to talk about one more that I don't have on the slide, because this will come up usually as a question, is people will usually ask me somnambulism. So I'd like you to add somnambulism to your notes. Somnambulism is sleepwalking, and if you're sleepwalking at your age, then I would go talk to a doctor about it, because that's not normal. You shouldn't be doing that. If you're doing it occasionally, like maybe you did it once 5 years ago or once every 3 years or something like that, okay. But if you're sleepwalking on a regular basis, then you need to go get that checked out, because that could indicate some kind of neurological dysfunction. Somnambulism happens in stage 4 sleep because of course it can't happen in REM sleep because you're paralyzed unless you have this REM behavior disorder. So in little kids that their brain is not developed, it's normal. So a lot of kids, you can just pick them up out of bed and they'll start walking, and I wouldn't be concerned if a child under the age of puberty is sleepwalking. They're not dangerous, just put them back to bed. They're in stage 4 and they're just doing this. But once they hit puberty, their brain should be developed enough to control that. It may be still somewhat common during puberty, but definitely by the time you reach 20, you shouldn't be sleepwalking. Okay, one more question that I get right in here is, what about these things called night terrors? Because that's very common in children too. And so what happens with night terrors is it's not a nightmare. A nightmare is a bad dream. That happens in REM sleep. But a night terror it's something that happens in stage 4, like sleepwalking. And the child will just wake up screaming, 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 crying, 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 and you go, what happened, what happened? And they'll just stop and they'll look at you and say, what are you doing in here? And so they weren't having a bad dream, it's just for some reason during stage 4 sleep, their brain is triggered to scream and cry. And it happens in young children and it happens in elderly people. We don't know why, but like maybe your grandma, all of a sudden she wakes up screaming, screaming, and you think this horrible thing is happening to her, but then when you go and ask her, she'll say, no, I don't remember anything, nothing was happening, I wasn't dreaming about anything. Okay, I'm sorry I said that was the last question, but actually there's one more that comes up here, is then the next thing I'll get is sleep talking. What about sleep talking? Okay, what I know from about sleep talking is they say that it happens about 50% of the time in REM sleep and 50% of the time in the other stages of sleep. So sometimes they're talking as part of a dream, and sometimes it seems to just be spontaneous chatter or talking something or other. So when they're in REM sleep, you can kind of have a conversation with them, but I cannot promise you that the conversation is the truth because the brain is in a different state of consciousness. And just like I'm not going to tell you that when someone's under the influence of alcohol, it's the truth. It may be the truth for that state and moment in time, but when their brain goes into a different state of consciousness, it may not be the truth for them. So sleep talking happens. It's not a bad thing if you're still doing that at your age. We don't see any negative